There were 50 copies made, and then the plates were destroyed. Number 1 copy was given to Lady Astor. I didn't know that history, but I did know of Lady Astor's sponsorship of Lawrence, so I drew her out on Lawrence, asked her questions, told her I had read the 7 Pillars of Wisdom and how much I had enjoyed it. And she took an interest in the fact that I was interested in their protege, and she says, I'm going to do something special. But she said, you will care for it at the peril of your life, because I'll have your head if anything happens to this book. It's a treasure to me. The very next day she brought me, well wrapped up, lovingly wrapped up, the number 1 issue, the number 1 copy of The Mint. And she left it with me long enough to read that wonderful, bitter bit of work. Wonderful literature. I was almost relieved to get it back out of my hands and back into her custody, because it is, and still is, such a magnificent treasure. So it happened that I got to read this rare, rare book. And that led to further conversations and stories that Lady Astor told about Lawrence and what a strange genius he was, and how much she treasured her relationship with him, platonic though it was. So that's the story of the leg. They finally, it remained open and unhealed for about 6 weeks, and finally they felt that it was clean enough to finish sewing over. And then I was moved from number 11 hospital to Roman Way Convalescent Hospital in Colchester, England. And of course, the Allies were well ensconced on the continent by this time, and Hitler had unleashed his V1s and his V2s, and we were on Buzzbomb Alley at Roman Way Convalescent Hospital. And by the way, there were 3,000 casualties at Roman Way Convalescent, and I think the best part of 2,000 of them were motorcycle accidents. Lord Haw-Haw, who used to poke fun over the Berlin radio at the Canadian forces, at any of the Allied forces, used to say, give the Canadian troops enough rum and enough motorcycles and we'll never have to fire a shot at them, they'll kill themselves. There was more than an element of truth in that, I'm afraid. So, the story of the lady.
If you're on the war, it strikes me there's a story at the end of the war when you were garrisoned with a Batman in a Hitler youth camp.
Oh well, that's one of the fun stories. There was a very good book written about the war, entitled "Some of It Was Fun," and it was a good book and full of good humor, and touched lightly on the horror of war, because there's lots of that, but it touched heavily and wrote charmingly about some of the fun sides of war. And I was lucky enough to get involved in a number of incidents that were real good fun. The shooting had stopped. Our unit, I was Lines Officer of the 2nd Canadian Corps, a Lines Officer, because there were a group of us, including my good buddy and old friend Charlie Shoup. who to my children became Uncle Charlie, because we remained good friends after the war, and indeed I'm still a good friend of Charlie's. But the shooting had stopped. We were stationed at that point very near Oldenburg, and in northern Germany. And one day Charlie and I decided that we would like to go up and see Emden. So we borrowed a Jeep, and we started. We'd gone about a quarter of a mile, and we heard a mighty roar in front of us. As we turned the corner, there, spread through the trees, was a British truck that had hit a landmine. And strangely enough, the road had been signed by the sappers, by the Royal Engineers, as verges cleared. Well, the verges hadn't been cleared in this area. Fortunately, the truck driver was on his way home from leave, had all his gear in the co-driver's seat, duffel bags and all kinds of soft stuff, as well as some hard chunky stuff. His front right wheel struck the mine, and it blew that whole side of the truck off. And I guess his gear absorbed what shrapnel might otherwise have cut him to pieces, and he got out of the remains of the truck totally unhurt, totally dazed. It took Charlie and I a long time to find out what his unit was. We had him stay right there. I went to the nearest farmhouse, which was only 150, 200 yards away. Very tidy, very nice home, and there was an elderly couple in there, and they pretended not to speak a single word of English, and my stammering along in the one or two words of German that I knew wasn't getting me very far. I was saying, "Wo ist der Minen?" And they shrugged as if they didn't know what I was talking about, although they damn well knew what I was talking about. So I drew my pistol and cocked it, and they started to be much more cooperative. And I described to them that I wanted that whole area taped off as unsafe. Well, we have no tapes. So I pointed at their curtains, and they thereupon ripped down their curtains and ripped them into ribbons, and found some stakes, and went out and hammered stakes and strung ribbons along, and improvised some signs, Achtung Minen, and hung those from the... so we protected that area, and when I felt that part was done, Charlie and I went on to the nearest unit, headquarters that we could find, British unit, and we told about this poor lad's accident, and then felt free to go on in our travel. And we went up to Emden, and it was there that we liberated the right-angled, high-powered aircraft viewing binoculars, and I think Charlie still has those. We had them for quite a while at our cottage at Loon. They were super, super, super binoculars. Well, that was not one of the fun parts of being, because by then we were stationed at a Hitler Youth encampment, where the Hitler Youth had obviously been pretty luxuriously treated. It was on the shore of a pretty little lake called Weissensee, a lake a little smaller than Loon, a little narrower than Loon, and not nearly as long as Loon.